some pieces of media are utterly informed by an internet-oriented perspective. The way of older art forms like books and film is usually an aversion to certain types of writing, or at least in the past. The idea of ladening your art down with pop cultural references was not simply a path to success. But in the age of the internet in which referential humor reigns supreme, the idea of highly referential media became far more prominent. So in comes Broforce. This game is pure nonsense, and I do not say that in a negative sense. The fact that it is utter nonsense works extremely well in its favor. Broforce is basically 1,000 pop cultural references pulled together to make a far more original pastiche. Basically, you play as a large array of randomly selected pop cultural action heroes as you blow your way through the world and destroy everything in your path. It's highly stylized, ridiculous, and fully destructible. Broforce, outside the wanton use of references to action cinema, is also a satire. The entire thing is made up of exaggerated machismo that would not be out of place in a Hollywood action movie. The destruction and devastation that comes in these kinds of movies, and the utter lack of consequences that you would come to expect. The complete refusal to have any sort of introspection, for comedic purposes, of course. And blatant Americanism. It is a very light-hearted parody that pokes fun at the way Americans see themselves through the kinds of movies they make. You cannot divorce Broforce from the real world. It only truly makes sense with its highly exaggerated and ridiculous presentation when you know who they are mocking. As a narrative experience, Broforce is not exactly complex. You are fighting the bad guys. That's all that really matters. They're bad. You're not. In fact, you're a badass action hero. Who are you in particular? Well, you're no one. You're just an action hero. That's all that matters, isn't it? The fact that every character is essentially a pop culture reference to either an action hero or action movie actor is all that truly matters. The individual character you play means nothing. In fact, when you die in the game, you respawn as a different action hero. It does not matter who you are as an individual here because the narrative is more concerned with them being action hero. The pop cultural status of these parodied characters is the thing that gives them more tangibility. So while these characters are clearly based on real people and other fictional characters, they are different enough to be legally distinct. Or at least they seem to be legally distinct enough because Free Lives, the company behind the game, seemingly hasn't received legal action as a result of it. The whole thing works because of how silly and over the top it all is. Something also worth mentioning is that Broforce is not an American game. In fact, it comes from my country, South Africa, and that's kind of because the people who can best parody America are often not Americans. There's a certain sense that you learn through engaging with Americans online and through their media that they have something of a superiority complex and cannot truly fathom anything outside of their own perspective. So the people who will parody them best are non-Americans. They even do it so well that people are surprised when those parodying them are revealed to not be American. The outside perspective is often needed to truly understand something. This applies to people too. You do not truly and fully know yourself. You know the version of yourself accessible to you. However, it requires an outside observer to see other parts of yourself. Many of us lack the introspection to truly understand ourselves. That's basically why psychologists have a job. Broforce managed, through a meta-textual and postmodern pastiche of references, to tap into something very real and tangible about the American mindset. It is, of course, highly exaggerated. There is nothing about Broforce that screams realism in the sense that it shows the specific ways that Americans do fundamentally think as a whole. But what this game does is show something that, while being over the top, is still aspirational to a certain kind of person. Now, if you are an American, you may take umbrage with the claim that Broforce is an accurate representation of an American mindset. You may, for instance, not want to see this kind of destruction for the fun of it, but here's the thing. Basically, this is how most people outside of America see America. We associate America with exactly the things that Broforce combines into such a silly package: wanton destruction and pop culture. That's what America is to much of the world: the desire to destroy and blow things up, while also making movies that glorify the way in which things are destroyed and blown up. It is quite a funny thing that no piece of media I have ever personally experienced has left such an American impression on me than one that was made by a South African game studio from my home city. Broforce is very clearly a parody. It is not realistic in the slightest. It is not trying to be realistic. It is trying to be funny. It wants to poke fun at the sort of ridiculousness you find in a lot of American action media. It wants to have a carefree environment in which things go boom and there are no consequences for any actions that are made. And that's fine. Games can serve as escapist entertainment, and the success of this game shows that it must have struck a chord with people. but it is also worth examining why that is the case. Deeply intertextual pieces of media like this show a non-traditional means of telling us a story. We know the references, and by using that information, the game does not need to explain all that much. It allows for greater ease in narrative conveyance, but not very many people manage to succeed at all in quite the way that Broforce does. However, the next time you see something that is basically all reference, try to pay attention to what it is doing with those references and why.